It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both Presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. Al, welcome back to the mainland. As you might know, we've now entered impeachment season, and we are looking at the House approving a formal inquiry into Joe Biden and corruption. Comes at the beginning of the 2024 political season. And I just wanted to get your point of view of what they expect out of this. What are the political advantages? And then what Joe Biden can do to counterbalance this?
Well, first of all, it's good to be back. I don't know what any rational Republican would want to get out of this, but I think what they're going to get is a big headache. Basically, this shows again how this Trump-controlled nutcase caucus has now complete control of the Republicans in the House. Not even one Republican was willing to vote against an inquiry where there's no evidence and no charge. It is so bizarre. I know there are all these charges against Hunter Biden, and he's a bad boy. But as Mitt Romney reminded us, Hunter Biden wasn't president. But maybe to Jim Jordan and Comer, Hunter Biden is the president, and so we can go after him. Looks to me this is just an attempt to divert attention from the Trump trials, which are going to dominate most of the early part of next year, or Trump's legal problems if he keeps delaying the trials. For Biden, he ought to just largely remain civil. If there are any real charges, deal with them, but largely stay out of the way and let Jordan and Comer make fools of themselves. Remember, to me, what really matters is how the swing voters in swing states that are going to decide the election are going to react. And I just don't think they're going to react positively to a trumped-up impeachment inquiry, which is going to go nowhere. So what should Biden do? He should focus on the issues that he needs to deal with to rebuild his coalition. First, he's got to deal with inflation. Second, and I think maybe even most important, is this issue of order. It's immigration and it's crime. And third, I think he ought to do what he did at the end of 2022 and with his surrogates try to refocus the campaign on democracy and freedom with an extra emphasis on freedom of choice. Look, he ought to focus. What he ought to do immediately as he goes, he's about ready to enter the new year with the State of the Union and his new budget. He needs to drop his emphasis on Bidenomics, which has been a disaster, really, politically, and focus on inflation. He ought to focus on the prices that are going down. Inflation reports are good. Fed doesn't look like it's going to increase interest rates anymore. He ought to talk about lowering prescription drugs and the cost of insulin and all of those advantages or things that he's done. And I think most important, he needs to present a tight budget, an anti-inflationary budget, which with spending cuts, enough to make some in his own party on the progressive side scream a little bit so people understand that they're real cuts. On immigration and crime, to me, are really important because they give people the sense that, that things are out of control. So Biden needs to change course on those. He can start by making a deal with the Republicans, which he looks like he wants to do on immigration. Immigration is obviously a complicated issue. But one thing that has become clear, and even when I was down in the BVIs, I saw a story about this, is in Democratic strongholds in inner cities and in Democratic blue states, governors are really becoming concerned about immigration. I saw a story about Denver. Nobody would assume that the migrant problem was going to affect Denver, but but migrants are living on the streets in Denver. Mike Johnson is in trouble, the mayor, because of that. It's costing them 5 times what they budgeted to deal with immigrants. Biden has to do something on that, and I would think that a good anti-crime initiative, maybe more cops and more cop training, would be pretty important. He ought to remember what happened. Why we don't have control of the House was because we lost 6 seats in New York that we should have won because we ignored the crime issue. Finally, as I said, I think he ought to get the governors and other Democratic surrogates, and he himself ought to start focusing on how the stakes of this election are historically high. Well, in the areas of protecting democracy, that Trump is a big threat to democracy and our freedoms, and with the Dobbs case, that seems like a clear issue for Democrats. Look, that's a course that will strengthen Biden with the swing voters in the states he needs to win. The progressives may be unhappy, but if we chase them, if he chases the progressives in the first few months of next year, he's going to lose the election. Because in the end, if Trump is the Republican nominee, the progressives are going to be faced with a choice. Somebody who they may not be happy with in Biden, or somebody who's going to destroy them in Trump. And I don't think that'll even be a hard choice for them.
Craig, what's your take? Does this give the Republicans a little bit of an advantage going into the presidential election?
I don't think it does. Al and I are kind of on the same track. I look at Congressman Jordan, and he strikes me as a guy on a fishing expedition without a boat. I mean, Al is quite right. There, no evidence of a crime, no evidence of any infraction. Claims, and apparently has convinced his colleagues in the Republican caucus, with a lot of help, I think, from Donald Trump, who simply wants revenge, that if they just get the majority of Congress to embrace this, they'll have subpoena powers and investigative powers that'll help them find something after a year of finding virtually nothing. If I was sitting in the White House as chief of staff, I would say to the president, do not ever utter another word about this nonsense. We'll find somebody in our White House counsel's office to deal with it. He or she will be the only person who ever speaks of the matter. Anybody else in the White House staff who speaks of it will get terminated, and they ought to get as far away from it as they can, not because it's serious, but because it's frivolous, and it doesn't deserve the attention that it's getting. I also would say to the president's son, I hope you had a good day. That was a nice statement on the steps out there. Don't ever do that again. Cooperate with this investigation. And because Al and I have seen countless numbers of people in a public setting or public life who just are convinced if they go out and make their passionate statement and profess their innocence, well, the opposition to them will just fall away. It never happens. It solidifies the opposition, and your friends are still your friends. It doesn't do much for them. But what he did by this was poke, the Republicans in the eye and say, you want me to come in and testify? I'm not going to do it in a closed hearing. I get it. I mean, but he could have gone into a closed hearing and then come out and said, this is what I told them. He's obviously afraid that some parts of what he says will be leaked and it'll reflect poorly on him. Anyway, I just think that this is not deserving of the attention it's getting. And the only way the press can really keep playing the story up is if there's a fight. And it ought to be, it's frivolous. We've got an attorney assigned to it. If more information, when more information is warranted, that person will speak on our behalf. So I actually think that Jim Jordan's made a big mistake, because I think by raising the stakes and claiming he now has the ability to get all the information he needs, assuming that there's no smoking gun, which Lord knows there's been a lot of people looking for one, then he's going to get these powers, and we're going to go into next year, and he's going to try to make a story of it, and he's going to be embarrassed because he's got no more information with his subpoena power than he had before he had subpoena power. That having been said, reading a really interesting polling story, actually it was an interview with a Republican and a Democratic pollster in the Wall Street Journal. One of the things that it reminded me of was about this time, way back a long time ago in the Reagan administration, our pollster, Dick Wirthlin, came in and sat with a few of us and said, folks, here's the problem. We don't have, of the people that voted for Reagan the first time around, we've lost a number among several coalitions. And the focus became on, what do you do with those groups to win them back? And the polling that was presented in this Wall Street Journal interview suggested that 87% of the people who voted for Biden last time are prepared to vote for him this time. And the interesting part about that is, and the point that the Republican made in this panel, was that the good news for Biden is that the people who are not supporting him at the moment are winnable, kind of as Al was suggesting, in a sense that they're unlikely in the end to vote for Trump, but right now they're disappointed with the performance of Biden. It's Black voters, Hispanic voters, Asian voters, and so Al laid out an interesting agenda. It sounds right in many ways, but really the people that need to be won over by an agenda are those voters who've stepped away from him, because if he wins them back, he wins. Yeah. And so I think the analysis, in my mind, I'm guessing, goes more to the economic concerns that the voters in those categories have, regardless of what's in the news, regardless of what the White House says about Bidenomics. They go to buy gas, they go to buy groceries, they go to get a mortgage. Those things are all more expensive than they were 3 years ago, and perhaps they're coming down. Perhaps the economy is improving on a timeline that's going to work well for the Biden administration. But I think that they need fewer topics and more focus on what's really impacting those constituencies that were with them that are now a little bit against them.
You know, Al, one of the more disconcerting things over the last few days or week or so is how quickly the Republican Party has been using funding of Ukraine for these immigration reforms at a critical stage in that conflict. What gives on that front?
You know, the Republicans don't really care very much, or at least the House Republicans don't care very much about Ukraine. The serious Republicans and the Senate Republicans, like most Americans, understand this is a fight that is important to us for freedom against Russia. But don't forget that you know, the Trump wing of the Republican Party isn't the Ronald Reagan wing. You know, they're sympathetic to Putin. They're sympathetic to autocrats. And so it doesn't surprise me that, you know, the House Republicans would try to use immigration, which has been a very good issue for them, to try as leverage on Ukraine. I mean, if they had their way, they'd only do immigration and not Ukraine at all, I'm sure. And you know, they elected a speaker who is, you know, he is the nice version of Matt Gaetz or Jim Jordan. So he's not going to, he doesn't have any particular brief for Ukraine. But you know what? It's an opportunity for Biden, because the immigration issue is killing Biden. And by making a deal with them and moving his policy, on immigration, Biden will help himself and perhaps be able to get substantial aid for Ukraine, which we have to do. So the thing about the Republican right-wing nutcase caucus is they're not very strategic. They fight at the moment, and they don't think down the road. But if Biden's skillful and smart enough to take advantage of it, their efforts to tie Ukraine and Israel aid to immigration reform gives Biden a chance to say, we've got to do this and change his policy on what has been probably his weakest issue.
Craig, you have the last word this week.
I think Al and I kind of get to the same place, but a little different route. I actually believe that a significant number of House Republicans are very concerned about Ukraine and want the aid to go there. The cynical side of me says, however, that their strategy is always very short term, and they seem to think leverage is the best strategy on almost everything, and so they're willing to go down a path. By the way, a path well traveled by these Republicans, where they create a crisis. At the last minute, they expect the president will cave, and they expect then, when he caves on immigration, which is what they really care about and they know is an important political issue, for many of them in their districts, probably more important than aid to Ukraine, they think they'll get credit for it. The mistake they make is that the president has the bully pulpit. And so Al is quite right. If in this process, when the dust clears and the president has aid for Ukraine, aid for Israel, and an immigration package of some kind, he'll get the credit for it. And so they're walking down this path, creating a crisis where at the 11th hour, 11th hour and 58 minutes, a solution will be arrived at. I don't believe they're going to get the credit they want. And in at least my experience, it's almost unique to see them using serious foreign policy concerns that really matter as kind of bargaining chips. But that's the path that we're on. In the end, I think we'll see assistance coming to Ukraine, Israel, and probably for all sorts of important reasons, including political ones, an immigration package.
We have to leave it there. Al Fromm, Craig Fuller, thank you so much indeed. We will see you next week.